What is your holiday wish list this year? Well, for peripheral artery disease patients, those with artery blockages, whether it's in their legs or whether it's in their hearts, cardiovascular disease, even diabetes, which is a precursor to any vascular and cardiovascular issue. What is on your holiday wish list this year? Well, that's what the Heart of Innovation is focusing on today. I'm with my amazing co-host, Dr. John Phillips.
Kim, you froze.
Did I freeze? No.
No.
Right. We'll pick it up.
Nope, that was all me.
All
And
right.
it was so perfect too.
I thought it was me.
We're live.
It
We're
is
still
live.
So
That's
everyone
right.
who's watching, we have a pre-record for our big The Heart of Innovation podcast, and I froze. So gosh, gone it. You get
That
to do it
might
again.
give us an idea. That might give us an idea about what to go in and get Kim
It's
better
pretty close.
internet
Yeah,
service.
and I'm freezing here in Columbus, so
Oh, Kim needs new internet. That's what Kim needs. Okay. So for those of you, that was a fire drill. I'm sure the first is going to be better than my next take on this, but we're gonna give it a try here. I will take two on this one. In
love it.
three and two. What is on your holiday wish list this year? If you have artery blockages in your legs, inflammation in your leg arteries, known as peripheral artery disease, or artery blockages in your heart, known as coronary artery disease, or even the precursor, which could be diabetes, what are you asking for this holiday season? Well, that's what we're focusing on in today's show for the Heart of Innovation. And Dr. John, I originally was thinking that we were going to focus on what you could put in, under the tree, in the stocking. But I think that this conversation might lead to such a grander, deeper discussion about our entire healthcare system and the system failures that might be happening, leading to not so desired outcomes, whether it's for PAD or coronary artery disease, or even diabetes. So we may start with walking sticks to help you walk further, maybe some foot cream, maybe some wool socks to keep your feet warm. But I have a feeling we're going to do a deep dive into PAD care. That's where I think this conversation is going.
Well, I number one, thanks for having me tonight. And I'm glad we could get the group together here and have this conversation, because it is hard to believe that almost 3 weeks we have Christmas, because Thanksgiving was so late. So hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. But yeah, I mean, I was in the pre-show kind of conversation. I just gave a talk to a group of podiatrists and some other physicians, and we kind of talked about the burden of CLTI and the burden of amputation.
Right.
And I came across this statistic. Okay, so just if you could, and just indulge me here for a second.
Okay.
So it is kind of estimated that there are between 130 to 185,000 amputations in the United States each year. Now, the majority of those are from complications due to PAD and diabetes.
Right.
So depending on, now I've read some where it's like 60%. This quote was from a study that said 82%. But even if you do conservative numbers, you're talking probably 60,000 amputations a year, major amputations. So we're talking above the ankle, and anywhere from 120,000. So despite what we've been doing, despite the soapbox you're on, I'm on, we're still having these amputations. And so the question I asked the group is, do we think the amputation rates are trending upwards or downwards or staying the same in the United States? So I'm going to pose that to the hangout session here, if I may.
Yeah, we have a very large studio audience here, and which is great for our tapings. And if anyone wants to actually chime in, just go ahead and let us know. Raise your hand, put it in chat, and we will definitely get to you. I know I had heard, there were some numbers that said that there are fewer amputations than before, and there's some that are saying there are more. It's hard for me to believe that there are fewer, because what I'm seeing every day is still, we have 100 new patients that join our network every week, and at least 30% of them are on deck for amputation. And so many have never had any sort of attempt to open up their arteries prior to amputation. I've had two just this week that we sent in through emergency rooms, one on Sunday and one on Monday. Neither one of them was offered a proper angiogram prior to the amputation. And in both cases, I got calls from the doctor, one in St. Louis and the other one over in Lafayette, Louisiana. And each doctor said, if the doctor only took a wire and a balloon and at least tried, they would have never gotten to the point of amputation being on the table. And both legs, thankfully, were saved.
Well, I mean, again, like we've talked about this data from the like 2020, 2011, 2012. This was in a Medicaid population, I believe, of over 1 million patients. Or sorry, Medicare, 1 million patients, inpatients, and only 27% of those people had an angiogram before having a major. Gotten better. I think the number is, is upwards of 70% of people are now, but the amputation rates are pretty much stable, and there is a little bit of a decline. But the problem we're running into is our population's aging. We have rising rates of diabetes and obesity, and
Yeah.
that trifecta is what's driving this. So we need to keep doing what we're doing here. And actually, the last thing I'll say is there was a question in the chat from the talk that I gave, and somebody said, how do we address these, the 20 and 30-year-old crowd to reduce their risk factors for diabetes, obesity, and I don't know the answer to that, because we tell people to exercise, but it's really hard to get that horse to drink the water sometimes.
Well, especially when they're that young and they just don't see it as being in front of them.
Exactly.
Even when you diagnose someone with pre-diabetes or in the early stages of type 2, my dad and I went on a road trip over along the East Coast, saw some family, and I think just about everyone we came in contact with had type 2 diabetes, and not one was taking their diet seriously. They're like, oh yeah, I mean, it's, I can just take some metformin. Oh, the other one was like, oh, I just take some insulin and I can just eat normally and no big deal. I have one of the glucose monitors, and it just tells me when I need to take another insulin shot, or when I need to control my diet a little bit more. But for the most part, my doctor says I'll be fine. They're not talking about the grander complications that come along with even one extra sugar molecule in your bloodstream. And that is why I think, especially for the younger generation, we're seeing a greater number. I think Science Direct came out with a study a couple years ago that said that they're seeing an increased number of 18 to 27-year-olds presenting in emergency rooms in advanced stage peripheral artery disease, CLI, as you mentioned, critical limb ischemia or chronic limb threatening ischemia, on deck for amputation. And one of the key factors, one of the key driving factors, what do you think it is? Diabetes.
Yeah. No, I had, and we got to get to the group here, but it was this past August or July or whatever. I was coming home from work. It was a nice night out, and I passed a young guy who had a pickup truck, and you could tell he was an outdoor laborer of some sort, because I think there was a landscaping thing. But he probably looked like he was in his mid-20s, early 30s, smoking a cigarette. And earlier that day, I had just taken care of a patient who was, I think, in their 70s or whatnot, who had smoked forever and had horrific P.A.D. And I said to myself, man, I wish I could get in front of that guy, this 20-something-year-old, and show him this 70-year-old that, may lose a toe here because of smoking. But it's really hard to do that, and it's really hard to give perspective to the young. They say what youth is wasted on the young, or whatever the statement is, but they think they're invincible. And I get it. I was there, but it's hard, and we need to figure out a way to help these folks earlier, though.
I was in Germany, and the packs of cigarettes actually have
Oh, yeah.
amputated toes. They have limbs literally lost. on the packages. And one of a friend of mine's son, they actually talk about it as being a badge of honor. Who can get the most gruesome pack of cigarettes and still smoke? It is literally they use it as a badge of honor. So that's obviously not working. So we do need to figure out what will work. And I think a lot of it is just not letting them get started. A lot of them get started because of peer pressure, because of what they see in family and friends. And so it starts with each and every one of us leading by example. And coming up next, right here on the Heart of Innovation, we're going to get to our live studio audience. I see some hands raised. So we'll get to those in just a moment, right here on our holiday special for the Heart of Innovation on KDOW. Don't go away. And thank you everyone on YouTube for joining us. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to our channel. It's really important for great content like this. It really helps us a lot. There's someone that's cranking. If everyone can make sure you're muted, that would be amazing. Just because I hear some weird cranking, almost like there's something being twisted. I don't know what it is.
That's
but
your patience.
yeah, that's that's my patience. Okay. Especially after today, you should have seen that post. Okay, so do you want to take us back? And I don't know where it's going, but we have a live studio audience. You have Doug. I don't know what he's going to talk about. Marsha, whatever she's going to talk about. I'm sure Heinz will have something to say. Marina, I'm sure she'll have something to say as well. But
who had their hand up first? Doug?
I think Douglas did.
All
and
right.
then you have Imelda that actually did. You could even start with that. Imelda says she got her wish. She has no more diabetes. And also she asked for 30 days of PT for her P.A.D. So that might be a cool way to start.
All right, let's bring it back. This is, we're doing 8 minutes here. Okay. All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for hanging with us. We are actually in the hangout section of Miss Kimberly's P.A.D. world. Remember the whole Avatar thing when like you could, for $500,000, buy a house next to Snoop Dogg in an Avatar world or something? Anyway, we are live people chatting about, among other things, wish lists for those of us or our folks that suffer from peripheral arterial disease. So let's get to the audience. Douglas, your hand was up. You had a question or comment.
Yes, sir. You talk about amputation. I know we had an experience this week with a gentleman who went back to a doctor who wasn't going to be able to do so. It sounded like the gentleman was just resigned to go to this doctor, stay with this doctor no matter what, even if it was going to cost him his leg. And it did. And it's like, how do we, as a P.A.D. individual, I need to be able to be okay with getting a second opinion and not trusting that doctor blindly all the time. Especially now, if it's just going to be a toenail, that's one thing. But if it's going to be my leg, I really need to think about that. Going back to a doctor and being just blinded by the white coat.
It's
and
interesting,
at the same
Douglas, that
time,
you say that. Is that this is the second one in a week that has selected to have an amputation despite other options being available, and both posting that they are having the amputation right on social media for the world to see, so everyone could empathize or sympathize with them, or whatever the reason. But in both cases, there were options available. There was even one of them that I paid for a $400 round trip cab ride to a limb saver to have a consult. And the doctor was going to try to save the leg. And yet they went back to this other doctor that had failed procedure after failed procedure after failed procedure, and every single time wanted to amputate, but yet did another failed procedure. And they finally took the leg. 60 procedures, Dr. John. 60 procedures later.
60?
Still going back to the same doctor. And we had actually a mutual
Um,
friend of ours from North Carolina that you might be able to figure out who it was that said,
mhm.
I could save the leg.
Well, I
Patient
mean,
didn't go back.
okay, there's some the psychology of it. I mean, let's talk to the group because a lot of the folks in this group, if not all of them, have peripheral arterial disease or some vascular disease. So, I mean, at some point, I've talked to a lot of patients who they are kind of enough is enough. And a lot of times the pain gets to them and they said, take it off. I'm in too much pain. But I don't know. I imagine you probably get a feeling of despair or just the fact that you are too deep into a hole that you can't dig out of it. And this the exit strategy, the only exit strategy you might see is amputation to get on with your life. I don't know. I mean,
Dr. Phillip,
yes, sir.
I'll talk personally right now then. So I showed up at my vascular surgeon Monday to have some work done on my leg. And before I knew it, here it is Wednesday afternoon, and I'm waiting for the heart doctor to come back and tell me why he did a CAT today and went in 4 different places and couldn't get to my heart. And I'm wondering where he is. I'm sitting here, and I'm not being ugly, but I'm sitting here wondering why he hasn't come here
Wait,
yet.
where are you, Douglas?
I'm in Houston.
Are you in the
He's in the
hospital?
hospital.
I'm in
Oh,
the hospital.
oh
I
boy.
came in Monday. That's the insanity. I came in Monday to have some leg work done. My troponins went over 1,000,
Is that better, Bill?
and
That
they
better?
said no. And they said no. We got to do your heart first before we do
Yep.
this. But so they went in to do a CAT today, but he let me go at 2 o'clock because he said he tried right groin, left groin, and my right wrist and couldn't get into my heart because of my blockages.
Oh, he couldn't get to your heart.
He
Hmm.
couldn't get to my heart. He couldn't get to my heart. And here it is, 6:30. I haven't seen him afterwards to let me know where do we go from here. So you're right. It is that not only the physical, but think about the emotional that this brings on us, kind of on a regular basis.
Yeah.
When it is, sometimes it does feel like a revolving door.
Hmm.
And we've heard you and Kim talk about this. One surgery leads to another one. I started out with P.A.D. Now I have C.A.D. and here I am in a hospital bed Wednesday evening thinking, I almost cussed. Why you couldn't get to my heart? Where do I go from here? What do I do? I mean, what's the plan?
Yeah,
I,
you're left without a plan, right? And one of the good news is I've had patients actually that, and I know it's a little more risky, a little more. But I've seen doctors actually go through the carotid to go down. So I don't know how many times you've done that, Dr. Phillips.
I
Never.
have I've never done that before. The only time I've ever heard of the accessing a carotid, you well, you can direct access to carotid for carotid stent called TCAR, and then there are extreme cases where they'll do carotid access for like a TAVR, so an aortic valve. But we don't. I've never. I mean, there's always a way to get in. Frankly, left wrist, brachial. I mean, there's always a way. At
And
least
so
in my
that's what I
opinion.
think they're going to figure out tomorrow in combination and coordination with a cardiothoracic surgeon. So that's probably what they're going to be looking at. But for Douglas, I think that brings us back to Dr. John's question, which is, I guess you could understand where a person finally says, I just give. I just give.
Well, and I don't blame them, but again, if you look at the mortality rate, it's almost 40% at 2 years for a major amputation.
Yeah.
There's not too many. I don't know of anything that has a 40% mortality rate at 2 years aside from very aggressive cancers, which we know this is why we call P.A.D. cancer of the leg. But I I think you can't get in anyone's head. You don't know what they're thinking, but people say enough is enough.
Yep. And even if there are other options available, but I also hear that they like and trust their doctor because they have a white coat and because they came highly referred, maybe from another doctor, which was a situation we had today, not for a person on deck for amputation, but a person on deck for a femoral popliteal bypass, a thigh to knee bypass to get past a 100% blockage. And the reason the patient is going through with it is only because the person likes and trusts the doctors, claim that the doctor saved the life and limb maybe before, and this person came highly referred by his previous doctors. But there's no rest pain. There's no lifestyle limiting claudication to the point where they can't do a job or they can't take care of their family. They've never been put through a supervised exercise therapy program or a fully structured exercise therapy regimen, even on their own at home, to try it to see if it can be effective in growing natural bypasses. And this doctor does 6 FemPop bypasses per week. Vascular surgeons I talk to say they barely do maybe 1 to 2 a month now with the advanced techniques available in a minimally invasive way, whether with a wire and balloon and or the new P.A.D minimally invasive bypass by Endologics. So we can dive more into that. Nice cliffhanger for you, Dr. John. I'm sure you have a lot to say. So everyone stay with us right here on the Heart of Innovation on KDOW. Don't go away. Don't you love how I left you without having anything to say? You gotta kick us off.
There's plenty
You've
of
got the floor.
Yeah, there's plenty of meat on that bone. Okay, section 3, 8 minutes. What do you want me to tackle?
Marcia, do you still have a question or a comment or something? Because she took her hand down.
Yeah, sorry. I did, because it was about smoking, and we're kind of past that when you were talking about seeing the young man smoking. I was curious at that. It seems to me like more people are smoking less, but more people are smoking marijuana.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Why don't we bring that up? If you don't mind, we'll find a place for that again if you're going to stick around for a bit.
Yeah,
So
I am. I'm washing dishes. That's why I had myself muted.
Okay. And I'm sure Thomas would have something probably to say at some point about, because he's been told amputation a million times and he's tired and he's not giving up. So, Thomas, be on standby if you're willing to jump in as well, if Dr. John calls
I will
on.
do. I will.
Okay. Go ahead, Dr. John.
All right, section
3,
8 minutes. All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us, literally again. So let's get to the questions in the audience here. So I've got, let's see, Beth, your hand is raised. Do you want to go unmute and ask a question or make a comment?
Hi, yeah. I want to make a comment. You guys were talking about diabetes, and I am a type 1 diabetic. And, I'm on the Omnipod and the Dexcom and all that. And Kim was mentioning the fact that, a lot of diabetics are like, well, I don't have to worry about what I do.
Yep.
Because, and there's a lot of truth to that. With me being a type 1, my A1C is 6.3. I pretty much eat whatever I want. However, I watch what I eat. I count my carbs. I take insulin for every single carb I eat. So say for lunch, I could have 75 grams of carbohydrates. Okay, so let's say I get 80. I'll punch in 80 grams into my Omnipod device, and it'll give me insulin for 80 grams of carbohydrates. Okay, and so that's why a lot of type 1 diabetics, I believe, in my opinion, are saying that it doesn't matter what they do or how they eat because it's under control by doing it that way. So, I mean, I just wanted to put that in there.
No, it's a good point.
Unfortunately, I have to say I'm guilty of doing that. I eat whatever I want, whenever I want, but I count my carbohydrates. My A1C is 6.3. I'm doing great as far as my diabetes is concerned. So
Yep, we still want
I
to
just
get you
wanted to
below
say that.
6. And we've had type 1s
I'm
that have
working
gotten
on it.
below. I know you can do it. But that's a part of it that they're just not getting the education from the endocrinologist to say, hey, let's get you down to below 6 by not eating all of those carbs, not having to pump yourself full of additional insulin, because you could still have those extra sugar molecules that are causing damage to your artery walls and leading to the inflammation. And so it can still be a problem, but it's good to understand why this is happening. We have Imelda who's right here. She's a type 2, and it's possible to reverse the type 2, whereas it's not type 1. And she said her greatest holiday wish was to reverse her type 2 diabetes. And it looks like she was, after months and months, she was just able to do so. So she is very, very happy her holiday wish actually came true.
The only comment I'll make about that, because I clearly am not an endocrinologist, I think the vast majority of people that I run into who are type 2, so type 1, obviously you don't make insulin, so you need the insulin. Type 2s have insulin in, sensitivity, they're insensitive to it. And so they the pancreas isn't doing what it needs to do. So, the type 2s that I see often have a really hard time getting their blood glucose under control because they're not, I don't know that they're as in tune to what needs to happen in order to lower the hemoglobin A1C, lower the blood glucose levels. And they don't necessarily, the people I run into, and maybe it's a biased, group of people, but they're just not, they don't, for whatever reason, they don't take it seriously, I guess.
Yeah. Well, my
Because you
dad
don't
didn't
feel it,
either.
right? You don't feel it.
Exactly. My dad was pre-diabetic for what, 19 years, consistently pre-diabetic. And he ended up, and it wasn't until he was diagnosed with heart disease on the verge of a heart attack that he finally was shaken by a dietitian who says, I don't care. One sugar molecule can damage those arteries. We're reversing this now. You're changing everything. And he did. And he has not, trickled up since. So that's really good. And we just got his holiday wish came true, just had his PET scan. And after years of growth after growth after growth of plaque in his heart, he had a beautiful PET scan just last Monday. No ischemia,
Oh, so we had
no
a stress
additional
test. Very
growth.
good. Very good.
No additional growth. All of his stents are clear, and he has a 63% ejection fraction, and the doctors say he's doing great. So just keep on keeping on. So
for him.
definitely your lifestyle changes, they can go a long way. It might take some time, which is why I think, Dr. John, they're really hard to stick to, because you don't see the changes like that right away. After my dad's first year of lifestyle changes, he still had an 8% growth in plaque year over year. And he was like, why am I doing this? If I have to have another procedure, why in the world am I doing this? Why should I care? And it goes back to your question again. Like, I'm just giving up on everything. Like, nothing's working. Just let me die. And thankfully, his dietitian was really even keeled and very logical with him and said, sometimes it does take a couple of years for you to see the results. And finally, we're now 4 years later, and it's working. But 4 years is a long time. And
Well,
he's had 3 procedures.
So, we're talking about the holidays and wish lists. And then in the same vein, we're sometimes talking about things we can't really control, right? But so for example, we talk about metabolic syndrome, okay? So metabolic syndrome is a constellation of 5 things, okay? You have a large waistline. So, and I'll Google it, okay? Large waistline. So for men, it's over 40 inches. Women, it's 35 inches. Okay, so you can control that, right? You can wish for something to help you get your waistline under control. High triglycerides. Okay, triglycerides are, kind of often they're kind of like the fatty part of the cholesterol system, and so you can actually help lower those to some degree by changing what you eat. Now, some people have genetically high triglycerides, so that's a tough one, maybe. low HDL, so the good cholesterol. That's genetic. Really, the only thing you can do to that is exercise more. So you can raise it by exercising. High blood pressure, right? So we talk about there's half of all Americans have an elevated blood pressure. Half of all adult
Wow.
Americans. You've got 380 million people. Now, I don't know whatever percentage of those are 18 or older, but half of those people have a systolic blood pressure of 130. We can treat that. And then finally, it's that we talked about fasting blood glucose levels. So you're fasting sugar of more than 100. These are things that we can train. We can wish for mechanisms. And this is to your point about having a good dietitian, having maybe a trainer or somebody, or, I mean, heck, there's apps everywhere. So what I would suggest for this Christmas is figuring out, let's tackle, in this group, we can talk about the metabolic syndrome and we can tackle some of
Yeah.
these things. And that in and of itself will reduce your risk of heart disease, stroke, and developing type 2 diabetes. Because if you have a fasting blood glucose of over 100, it doesn't necessarily mean you have diabetes. And so really, I guess my point to this is there are things we can change, and starting a new year really, I think, is a great way to really turn the lens to you and look within and figure out what can I do to reduce my risk of coronary disease, peripheral arterial disease, cerebral vascular disease.
Without just depending on medication. And I just discovered this week there's a brand new cardiologist-backed food package called One Step Foods that went to the Mayo Clinic, performed research, and found out that their food, which is high in soluble fiber, psyllium husk, and plant sterols, clinically lowered cholesterol by, I think, about 9%, is, if I remember. I could be wrong, but it lowered it somewhat. And it's really great adjunctive therapy to talk to your doctor about those natural ways in which you can increase the soluble fiber, the psyllium husk. I think that's just Metamucil. And also plant sterols, and ask, if anything, for a referral to a dietitian who can talk to you about these natural ways to reduce those. And then
Yeah.
you can ask your family for great gifts, such as from One Step Foods, to help you lower your cholesterol without a lot of medicine dependence. But coming up next.
Oh yeah,
Go ahead.
Cliffhanger. I got it. No, you take this. You take this.
Coming up next right here on the Heart of Innovation. So much to talk about. We could talk forever about this. So stay with us. More to come on the Heart of Innovation on KDOW. Don't go away. I know, this is actually a fun conversation. When I'm on the cruise, maybe we just do this, because this is really fun.
We broadcasted one. You were on a cruise one time, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we did a show, I think,
Yep.
or recorded
Dr.
one.
Phillips.
Yes.
Dr. Phillips, I got a question. You brought
Well,
one of the topics.
Let's
up
do
on
it,
blood
Heinz.
pressure.
Let's do it. Let's do it live.
Well, this is a simple question. Why
We don't
is there
care.
a deviation from these electronic blood pressure machines versus the old style blood pressure machines where they just stick this stethoscope in their ears and you get a different reading? Why?
You know what? You're going to ask me that question when we come back. So hang tight. All right. Section 4 is 9 minutes.
Question.
That's a good question. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. So the cliffhanger before not the cliffhanger, but before we went to break, and we were talking about changing our diets, reducing our risk for metabolic syndrome. You can have a dietitian that your insurance will cover this. Okay.
Yeah.
And so my sister-in-law is a dietitian, and so she sees folks, and she has an independent business, but insurance covers it. And honestly, dietitians will not only help you with meal planning, but they will also tailor a meal and a meal. I guess I would consider it a kind of like a book, in the sense, with various chapters of how your day and week should kind of play out with respect to what you eat. So very tailored stuff to help you.
Yeah.
And typically the food's pretty good. So anyway, I digress. Heinz, you had a question about blood pressure monitoring.
Correct. The blood pressure, when I get my blood pressure checked, and I've heard of that it happens to others, they use these electronic devices. So I normally get somewhere around 140 over 78 or something like that. And then when they do the old style with the stethoscope, I'm normally around 115 over 73 or something like that. I've never had high blood pressure, but it's like, why is there such a big deviation? And I keep telling them, don't use the electronic ones, use the manual ones with the stethoscope. And some of them don't do that, but I try.
Yeah, I mean, so the manual one, just that, it's manual and it takes time. Very few places actually do a manual cuff. And in fact, even in the hospital, if I attempt to do a manual, because you're listening for sounds, you're basically compressing the artery and you're listening for, at what pressure do you hear the sounds? We typically, so what I recommend is you can go to the AHA, American Heart Association, and in their website, they have recommended cuffs that you can buy. Now, they're not cheap, but they work. And so what I tell my patients is go to the website, find a cuff that, fits your budget, bring that cuff into, because the machines we have in the clinics are pretty accurate, frankly. They're very expensive, but so you can calibrate your cuff to that machine and then you know what it is. Because the last thing you want to do is be taking your blood pressure at home on a machine that doesn't work, right? And I'm not a huge fan of like these wrist ones, although I think the new Apple watches now have a mechanism of checking blood pressure. But again, it's going to give you, the other thing too is, blood pressure is like a wave. It fluctuates throughout the day. And a lot of times I'll have patients who they come in, like blood pressure is 160 over something, like, well, what's going on? It's like, oh man, traffic was terrible getting in here. I had to walk, your MA agitated me and whatnot. And I mean, I get that, but your blood pressure is still high. And so what I recommend, and there's guidelines for it, and there's all sorts of stuff now about blood pressure management, is, checking it when you're in the room, you sat down, your arms at that kind of table height level and things. And we really try to check patients' blood pressures a couple times in the clinic, usually when they get there, but then after the visit, and the blood pressure usually comes down a little bit. But we put more stock in ambulatory readings than we do in the readings that we get in the clinic, which is why if you're checking your blood pressure, you need to have a good cuff.
That answer your question, Heinz? Yep. He says, yep. Okay.
All right.
So on.
Who else?
So I think that Marcia wanted to jump in and then we'll get to Thomas.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. There were two things I was thinking. One is about smoking, and I think probably across like the general population, smoking has gone down, and maybe the youth aren't smoking as much, but marijuana smoking has probably gone up. And so I was wondering the correlation with that, with smoking pot, and also versus edibles or anything else, just the smoking, how that affects P.A.D. The other thing I was thinking about is talking about like Christmas wish list and maybe New Year's resolutions, is that with your health and P.A.D., a lot of times resolutions, it's like, oh, the gyms all fill up in January and then by February, nobody's there. That really, we're not thinking we're going on a diet. I mean, you can't think that way. It has to be your whole lifestyle change and a commitment to changing your lifestyle, not a short-term goal. It's a long-term goal. And your thoughts on that, I guess.
I think that, again, anytime you're lighting a piece of, plant on fire and then throwing it down your lungs, I can't imagine it's good for you. Okay. And that is one of the worries. I mean, I think there is a growing body of evidence that suggests that smoking marijuana does affect lung function. Now, is there a risk factor? Meaning, does it increase risk of lung cancer? I don't know. I think it can cause some of the the chronic effects of inflammation and like mucus production and things like that, that smoking tobacco produces, but more data needs to come, or more research needs to be had. At any rate, I do see less people smoking, at least in the US, although if you travel outside the US, I feel like everyone still smokes, but they're not as heavy as we are. So, take that for what it's worth. What was the second part of your question?
Before you do that, I just
About-
found there are a number of studies that we have read that actually the smoking of pot or even vaping can lead to artery damage. So I've been actually doing a lot of research on it since that Science Direct article came out a couple of years ago about the number of patients. And I was talking to Mary Ost, who's a world-renowned researcher of P.A.D. and its implications, and she was looking into it as well. And she was saying she saw a strong correlation in the studies that she read, that a lot of what we were seeing with this early onset of CLI in these younger people is a lot of the vaping. So either diabetes or vaping or marijuana use.
Yeah, the vaping, I mean, again, just think about it. You're lighting something on fire, throwing it into your lungs. It's going to cause inflammation. It's going to irritate the airways, and I mean, you're damaging the tubes, the bronchioles. So I mean, don't do it. Now I can't speak to THC in a gummy, because there are reportedly benefits from doing that, pain, etc. So just don't smoke, frankly. It was funny because I was talking to a patient who has an aneurysm and telling him about some of the risk factors. And I said, well, don't smoke. And he's like, I'm 69. Why would I start now? And I said, you'd be surprised. I've had several patients who've started smoking in their 50s and 60s for whatever reason. So I guess it's never too late, but just don't do it.
And Marcia, what is your other question that you were asking?
Oh, it was about making resolutions and not really short-term goals, but really life-changing and sticking to it and wrapping your head around that. I'm not on a diet for the month of January.
So maybe I think that's a good point. I think people make really lofty goals and they sound good, but what about making smaller goals? Taking one step. And we always have Douglas here who says, just take one more step, just take one more step, and make that your New Year's resolution. Just one more step and then another step. And maybe you have a greater chance to reach the goal that you desire.
I have
So,
to add
remember-
just a little bit to what she was saying. There's a big difference between long-term goals and short-term goals. So she's absolutely right about that sense. You need to make a list of long-term goals and short-term goals, goals that you can reach, that we each can reach daily, that 10 extra steps, that 5 extra steps, no salt this week, 5 ounces of more water today. Those are short-term goals that we can reach daily and accomplish daily, that gives us the inspiration to reach those long-term goals.
I love that. We'll come up next right here on the Heart of Innovation. We'll have final thoughts on this special holiday show on KDOW, so don't go away.
Man, so quick. 4 minutes
I know.
left.
So didn't
No,
know if we should get Thomas, and he just has a thing just on your question about that you asked earlier. I mean, when the reason people settle, and he's not one to settle. So he might be one just to get a
Sure.
quick ending, kind of round full circle, but you take it where you want.
I'll just say the
And
last thing. We don't need to say it on air, but remember Little John, our sheriff from West Virginia, who fought the wild whites. And I wrote down something he said, and it goes along with what Douglas was speaking to. And I'm paraphrasing him,
I
but
think you need to say this on air. It's just you're making poetry. Don't waste it.
All right. Well, why don't you bring us back, Kimberly? Why don't you bring us back?
Then we'll go to your poetry.
Yeah, then go
Thomas,
to
we
my
only
poetry.
have a couple minutes, so we got to make it quick. Okay. I'm so sorry.
All right.
Okay. And then I'll get
Yep.
Thomas, and then we'll throw to you, Dr. Phillips, for your
Okay.
final poetic words of the session. You can close
Mhm.
this out. Okay. In 3, 2. Welcome back. We are rounding third, just as Dr. Phillips always says. I want to bring in one final caller here. Thomas, you had some thoughts that will take us full circle on what Dr. Phillips was asking earlier about why people might settle for amputation.
Honestly, on that, I believe, I'm not saying everyone, but it would have been so easy for me to have an amputation. But you got to think of the risk factors after that. For me, I think I was told, what, 25, 30% at 2 years?
40%. Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing it. And they really need to think on that. You know, it may be a good thing at the minute, but what happens to them in 2 years' time? They're not thinking long term. I understand for people it's absolutely necessary. But
Yep,
for
if
some,
life is on the line.
I
Yep.
honestly think it's an easy way out. It's like if you can't handle life, you know, they'll say, okay, I'm going to go shoot myself. It's an easy way out. I've got my fors and against, you know, but for me, it's absolutely a no-no. If I was going to die from having P.A.D, I would go with it, you know, rather than have my leg amputated, because I'm going to go with it then anyway. So because I mess up with my lungs, heart, and everything else. So.
Well, thank you for your courage and strength, Thomas. We're with you every step of the way. And no matter what you decide, we are at the Global P.A.D Association right there by your side to help you fight. And with final words, we want to bring in Dr. John again to give us a little inspiration on our holiday wish show. And I know that Thomas wishes for another day, another step, and so many feel the same way.
Sure. No, I think this has been a fantastic show. I always love listening to folks in the audience and hearing their perspective and their questions and comments. And this, what we were kind of talking about before was, you know, not settling. And I remember what Sheriff John, who we had on not too long ago, West Virginia, Sheriff, Big John, we call it Little John. And he said something along the lines like, you know, if I'm not doing more, you know, than I did yesterday, it's not good enough. So you could have done 20 steps yesterday, do 21 today. And these like small little atomic habits that they talk about in that book, Atomic Habits was written about. I mean, you just do something small and build on it. And next thing you know, you're doing 500 steps or whatever it is. So look yourself in the mirror. Say, you know what? Today, when I wake up, I'm going to do something that I didn't do yesterday, and life will be pretty good, I bet.
Just one more step. My holiday wish for all of you is for all of your holiday wishes to come true, and that you can reach your goal, your short-term goals and your long-term goals. But start with those short-term goals. Just one more step, one more step, one more sip of water, one dietary change, one less shaker of salt,
Cigarette, one
whatever
less
it may
cigarette.
be.
Yep.
One
Yeah.
less cigarette, one less puff of a cigarette,
Mhm.
and then one less cigarette.
Yes.
Just one step at a time. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. We are back next week with actually one of Dr. John's patients who is going to teach us a few holiday recipes. Eric is
Ooh.
back.
All right. I didn't know that. Sweet. Take care, everybody.